In Warsaw, I met Krzysztof Bozak, who was formerly the youngest elected member of the Polish parliament. Before we sat down for a full interview, Krzysztof took me across the street to show me some history, a 100-year-old beautiful university building. Inside, we saw plaques and memorials dedicated to young people who fought and died for Poland. I asked Krzysztof to tell me more.
We are in the main building of Warsaw Technical University. It's more than 100 years old. It was built before First World War when we were a part of Russian Empire. And I think it's one of the most beautiful buildings in Warsaw. It is used every month for big conferences and some events, this place where we are, commercial events also, but it's still an academic building where we have students around. And what is interesting that this building is also deeply connected with our history. For example, we have around many inscriptions on the walls about how it is connected with history. There were patriotic gatherings here before First World War. After, for example, here was command-in-chief of the army when we defended our country into 1920 against Soviet army, and also there were many patriotic gatherings, and also during Second World War as well. It was destroyed like all Warsaw after Second World War when we had Warsaw Uprising, but it was rebuilt in a very beautiful way, as we can see, and it was also inspired by architecture of Polish palaces.
Right.
Yes.
I think that you can definitely see that, because what I like about this is the ceiling. It almost makes you feel like you're outside.
Yes,
It's
yes.
like a giant courtyard. But could you tell me a little more about the architecture generally across the rest of Warsaw these days? Because there's some really beautiful places, but there's also some not so beautiful places, right?
Architecture of Warsaw is very mixed in styles. For example, this building is a typical eclectic building from this time of late 19th century, early 20th century. When Poland was not independent. After First World War, Poland became independent, and this historical architecture of the center of Warsaw was a part of our heritage, but Warsaw started to develop fast, and we built in a more modern way, but it was still quite classical, and Warsaw were completely destroyed, especially the center, by Germans during the Warsaw Uprising. They intentionally destroyed all historical buildings, so part of them were rebuilt after the war, and part of them were destroyed, and communists built a new one in a modern way from 40s and 50s, and it looks like modern socialist building. So we have big suburbs in Warsaw with blocks of flats, and it's not nice, it's not classical, but now we built new flats with which are much better, but still not classical.
Yeah.
So maybe we will have some neoclassical buildings, but it's not the case now.
You said something quite funny earlier about obviously it was terrible under Russian rule, but actually the buildings under Russian rule were better than under the EU rule, right?
Yes, unfortunately, we got some money from the EU, especially Polish universities, and they built in this stupid way that everything should be modern, and they think it's modern when it is very similar to industrial buildings or even industrial technological stuff.
Yeah.
So we do not have new buildings which could look like this. unfortunately. And when we were this part of Russian Empire, this part of Poland with Warsaw, Russians were supporting the classical architecture. So, for example, not only university buildings but also churches were built in this manner that we still think that they are very beautiful. And if you are not well educated in history of architecture, you could even don't recognize is it from 19th century or maybe is it from 17th century. You should be a fan of architecture to recognize what is what.
Well, as you know, as part of this film that I'm doing, I'm talking about the young people of Poland. I'm talking about the cultural patriotism, political patriotism, but also the historic patriotism of young people in Poland. And there's a plaque here that I was wondering if you might translate for me, which I think is really interesting if we go and take a look.
Yes.
So I believe this is about the young Boy Scouts, right, who fought during the uprising?
Yes, we had a very developed conspiration against German occupation during Second World War and before Warsaw Uprising, and this is the placard that commemorates one of the heroes of this Boy Scouts movement. He was a student of Warsaw Technical University and one of the leaders of this youth conspiration against German Nazi occupation. He was Tadeusz Zawadzki Zośka. It was his name and his pseudonym, Zośka. And he was, let's say, Boy Scout master, Boy Scouts leader. This is the rank in the Boy Scouts movement, and we have also here the symbol of Polish underground state. It was Polska walcząca, it means fighting Poland, Poland fights, yes. And he died in 1943, so before Warsaw Uprising, in one action against Germans, there were thousands of actions. For example, they attacked trains with transports, with equipment, with they organized explosives and attacked trains, attacked railways, attacked some transports to destroy the logistics of our enemies. And it was all organized not by only Home Army. He was also a soldier of Home Army, but youth helped in these actions. For example, getting the information, observing some objects and so on. So it was a kind of, let's say, intelligence, youth intelligence movement and sabotage movement, very well developed. And it was after the war, it was described in many books, now also in movies, and it inspires young people still. Before these guys were very brave. The actions were quite spectacular because Germans were very strong. So if you were not smart, you did nothing. But if you were smart, if you were observing Germans in a very prudent way, you can succeed with some actions, which made Germans very angry, and of course it was very sad because they destroyed all the city and killed so many people that it is hard to count. It was hundreds of thousands of people that they killed, not only Jews but many Poles and people of different origins who lived here in Warsaw, because we believe in Poland that in other countries people are focused especially on this Holocaust, and it was of course very, very sad, but people don't know that Germans took Polish people from the streets also to Auschwitz and killed them.
Yeah. So one thing that I find quite amazing is that this shows that even back then the young people were quite savvy. They fought in different ways. They were underground and they were stopping the logistics of these things rather than just normal flat-out war, right? And today, whether it's the young footballers or even the rappers who are doing it through culture, or even through politics, young people are doing things in different ways that are really pushing this patriotism in Poland, not through conventional methods.
Yes, that's true. And what is important to understand the situation in Poland is to see that, for example, this symbol now it is on many T-shirts, and it is in video clips of rappers, of people who football fans on the flags. So it is still living history among us, and also we do not see this chapter of our history as closed. Because, for example, now we as a country demand reparations from Germany because Germany never paid for what they did to Poland. There were a communist government after Second World War, and this communist government of Poland said to communist government of Germany that we don't want any reparation, but we do not agree with these communist puppets. So now Polish government is putting this into the international debate that maybe Germany should pay something for what they did to Polish people and to Polish cities, because it was not only Warsaw that it was destroyed, it was hundreds of Polish cities that were destroyed by Germans.
Well, thank you so much for showing me this. Cheers.
Thank you very much.
I want to discover the real story in Poland, not the fake news from the mainstream press that just says Poland is racist. I want to find out why the young people in Poland are voting conservatively and standing up in the face of EU and far-left tyranny. Will you help me do that? Will you help me cover our modest expenses for this trip? Please go to rebelpoland.com. Help us raise £1,000 for modest airfare, cabs, and of course hotel. Thank you so much for your support. Without you, our media organisation simply wouldn't exist. I wouldn't be here in Poland bringing you the story about the patriotic Polish youth, the story the media simply doesn't want you to know about. Thank you for your support, and if you'd like to support us in this trip to Poland, please go to rebelpoland.com.